I already knew my neighbor was nosy, but this time she outdid herself. It all started when I adopted a rescued monkey cub, a harmless little animal, smaller than a cat, and more polite than Karen herself. But of course, she couldn't let it go. In less than a week, the police were at my door, because according to her complaint, I was keeping a dangerous wild animal in the neighborhood. Dangerous? The monkey? Because, frankly, the most unbearable creature on this street has always been the monkey. I expected that one day, this woman would find a way to stick her nose where it didn't belong. She always had an opinion on everything. The color of my fence, how often I should mow the lawn, even the way I parked my car. But never, not even in my most bizarre nightmares, did I imagine that a monkey cub would be the trigger for World War III in the neighborhood. It all started quite simply. A friend who worked in animal rescue found an orphaned monkey that needed a temporary home until it could be taken to a sanctuary. It was a tiny animal, smaller than a cat, with eyes so big they looked like two shiny jaboticabas. He clung to my hand as if I were the last hope of his life. And, well, I've never been one to deny help to those in need. So I said yes. The problem? I lived next door to the most gossipy creature in town. For the first few days, everything went well. The monkey cub, who I called Benny, adapted quickly. He was curious, clever, and, ironically, more civilized than some humans I know. He didn't make a mess. He didn't bite. He didn't scream, unlike my neighbor, in fact. But of course, it didn't take long for her to sniff out that something was going on. The first time I realized she was spying was when I saw her head pop up between the fence boards, like a haunting. I pretended I didn't see it, but from that day on, whenever I went out into the yard with Benny, I felt that invasive gaze burning the back of my neck. And then came the first coincidence. I was quietly eating my breakfast when I heard a dry knock on the door. I opened it and found a City Hall employee holding a clipboard and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. We had received a complaint about an exotic animal being illegally bred at this residence. I swear I heard a mental ploft as I rolled my eyes. I discreetly looked away and, without any surprise, saw the curtain of the neighbor's house moving. Of course, I explained the situation. Benny wasn't a wild animal I'd picked up out of the blue. He was a puppy who'd been temporarily rescued until he could go to a suitable place. The official looked at his clipboard, sighed, and said that it was probably allowed, but that he would need to check a few rules before officially releasing me. Karen 1, me 0. But that was just the beginning. After that episode, the woman went into professional spy mode. Her level of intrusion rose to unprecedented heights. New camera on her balcony? She installed it. Changed the angle of the yard? Now she was pointing directly at mine. Did she start leaving the house with a notebook? Yes, because apparently she thought she was investigating a crime of international proportions. Did she see me feeding Benny? She wrote it down. Did she see me playing with him in the yard? She wrote it down. A leaf fell from a tree? She'd probably write that down too. It was pathetic, but I was calm, because I knew I wasn't doing anything wrong. The plan was simple. Ignore it until the day the sanctuary came to pick up Benny, and then sit on the balcony with a coffee and watch this woman lose her mind when she realized that her case had gone down the drain. What I didn't expect was that the meddling woman would manage to escalate the situation to an absurd level. Because reporting it to the town hall wasn't enough. She wanted something bigger, something definitive. And that's how, one fine day, I found myself surrounded by police officers in my own home. If there's one thing I learned from living with that woman, it's that she didn't know when to give up. Defeat was not an option. If a strategy failed, she just doubled down. And that's exactly what happened. A few days after the town hall visit, I was in the yard with Benny, enjoying the morning sun. The puppy was jumping up and down, clinging to my shoulder happily, never imagining that its existence had become a matter of national security for the creature that lived next door. That's when I heard the noise. Cars stopping, radios squawking, steady footsteps approaching my door. I turned around and, to my surprise, saw 3 policemen standing right there in front of my house. I took a deep breath. Was that it now? The woman called the police to arrest me for raising a baby monkey? That's great. Great. I made a point of looking away, and, as I expected, I saw a figure in her window. All that was missing was popcorn and a soft drink in her hand, because that scene was a real event for her. Good morning, sir. We've received a complaint about a wild animal being kept illegally at this residence. Report. The word hit my mind like a church bell. The woman hadn't just complained. She formally reported me. Now, let's think for a second. What was her justification? That I was running an underground zoo? That I was training Benny to be an organized crime agent? The most ridiculous thing was that, even with the police at my door, Benny was quietly clinging to my neck, licking my ear like a puppy would. Super dangerous. A real monster. The first policeman cleared his throat and looked at the monkey. Is this the animal in question? Yes, that's Benny, the most lovable criminal in the neighborhood. None of the policemen laughed. Too bad. They explained that they needed to check the situation and see if I was breaking any laws. With all the calm in the world, I invited them in. Did you want to see the space where Benny was staying? No problem. Did they want to check that he was well looked after? Of course. After all, unlike certain gossipy, nosy, and bitter people, I had nothing to hide. While the policemen were checking everything, I noticed that one of them looked uncomfortable. So, casually, I asked, "Curiosity, who made that complaint?" Silence. That strange silence of someone who knows the answer but can't speak openly. But I didn't need confirmation. I already knew. The same person who freaked out when I painted my fence a different shade. The same person who tried to call the police when they thought my lawn was uneven. The same person who acted as if they were the president of the neighborhood and had the right to control everyone's lives. The creature who lived next door. And then something wonderful happened. After half an hour of inspection, note-taking, and careful looking, the policeman finally came to their conclusion. The oldest of the group put away his notebook and said, "Sir, we haven't found any irregularities. Your animal is healthy, well cared for, and considering that this is a temporary situation, there are no grounds for any intervention." Translation: Karen lost. Again, I tried to hold back a smile, but failed miserably. But the best part was yet to come. The policeman turned around, went to the neighbor's house, and knocked on the door. She opened the door as if she was expecting a trophy. That's when the policeman, with the patience of someone who has dealt with many inconvenient people in his life, said something I'll never forget. "Madam, the complaint was unfounded. There is nothing illegal going on in your neighbor's house. We advise you to avoid making unfounded complaints in the future." I swear I saw her soul evaporate from her eyes. She tried to argue. She tried to say that wild animals are dangerous, that it wasn't safe for the neighborhood, that she just wanted to protect the community, but the cops weren't listening anymore. Her little show had officially failed. Well, I just stood there, with my arms folded, enjoying the show. Only, as I already knew, the woman wasn't going to accept this defeat so easily. She was still going to find a way to get even. And on the next attempt, things were going to get even more ridiculous. After the false accusation fiasco, any normal person would have backed down, swallowed their pride, got on with life, tried to pretend nothing had happened. But this woman? Number. She was driven by resentment and stupidity. She lost badly in front of her neighbors, was warned by the police, and, even so, decided she needed to make amends. And that's when she came up with the most imbecilic plan I've ever seen in my life. It all started 3 days later. The weather was calm, Benny was playing on my shoulder, and I was counting down the days until I could take him to the sanctuary. But then something strange happened. The neighbors started acting nice. First, a forced good morning. Then, a forced smile. And on the same day, I noticed that a new note had appeared on my door. Because yes, This woman had an uncontrollable addiction to slipping pieces of paper through other people's doors. I picked it up, expecting a veiled threat, but what it said made me laugh out loud. "Dear neighbor, I know we've had our differences, but I believe that every conflict can be resolved with a gesture of goodwill. I'd like to invite you to my house for coffee, so we can talk like adults and resolve this situation." Yes, she wanted to talk like adults. The same person who called the police on a monkey cub. The same person who had spent the last week giving me hell. Obviously, this was a trap, but since I'm a curious human being and like to see human stupidity in action, I decided to play along. So, the next day, I went to her house. And, look, I swear I held back my laughter. The woman had prepared a whole scenario for the ambush. Table set, coffee, cookies. It looked like a commercial for herbal tea. But the most important detail? A camera positioned discreetly on the shelf, recording everything. She wanted me to say something that she could use against me. Something that, with a well-edited cut and a sensationalist headline like "Neighbor Admits Illegally Breeding Wild Animal," could be thrown on the internet or used to try to get another complaint. Pathetic. But I decided to play around a bit. I sat down, grabbed a cookie, took a sip of coffee, and let her start talking. She started with a talk about the importance of maintaining a safe environment in the neighborhood, how we should respect each other, and how some choices can be misinterpreted by people. Translation: I don't accept having lost, and I need you to give me ammunition to keep minding your own business. So, after a few minutes of listening to that monologue, I decided to end the joke. "You're recording this, aren't you?" Silence. Her expression froze. "What? Of course not. Why would I do that?" I took out my cell phone, turned on the flashlight, and pointed it straight at the camera on the shelf. "So, this camera here is just an ornament, right?" She widened her eyes. I tried to hold it in, but I started laughing. "Wow, Karen, what a coincidence. Just on the day you want to make up, there's a camera pointed at me? Should I call the police this time?" She turned as red as a tomato. "You're being ridiculous. That was just for my safety." "Oh yes, safety. Because clearly I, a guy who temporarily raises a monkey cub, am an imminent danger to society." I got up, grabbed another cookie, because I'm not an idiot to waste free food, and left. But before I left one last message. If you want to make a new complaint, I recommend at least trying a plan that isn't stupid. And that's how Karen's foolproof plan ended in less than 5 minutes. But I should have known she wasn't finished yet. Because if there's one thing this woman does well, it's get even more ridiculous when she feels she's lost. And her last attack would be the most absurd of all. I should have known that woman wouldn't stop. It was impossible for her to simply accept that she had lost. After the failure of the taped ambush, I already imagined that she would try something even more idiotic. But I confess, even I was surprised by her level of desperation. This time, she didn't try to report it. She didn't try to manipulate neighbors. She didn't try to turn the authorities against me. She decided to attack directly. It was late at night when it happened. I was on the sofa, watching a movie, and Benny was sleeping peacefully on a blanket next to me, like the innocent baby he was. The plan was simple: finish the movie, give the little one last feed, and go to sleep. But of course, this woman had other plans. Out of nowhere, I heard a strange noise in the yard, a crack, something falling. I stopped the movie and remained silent, and then I saw a shadow moving. The woman had entered my yard. I didn't know what was more unbelievable: the fact that she had the nerve to actually invade my property, or the fact that she thought it would end well for her. I got up quietly, went to the window, and peeked out. And there she was, dressed in dark clothes, crouching near Benny's makeshift fence, and in her hand, a cage. She was trying to steal the monkey. It was at that moment that I realized this woman had completely lost her sanity. For a second, I stood still, processing what was happening. I mean, what was her plan? She was going to kidnap Benny and do what? Hide him in the basement? Sell him on the black market? Send a photo of him to the shrine and say, "Mission accomplished"? It didn't make any sense, but I wasn't going to let it go. I took out my cell phone, called the police directly, and, in the meantime, decided to have some fun. I went out the back door, foot by foot, and approached her without making a sound. She was so focused on trying to open Benny's house that she didn't even notice me standing behind her. That's when I said, in the calmest voice in the world, "Need some help?" She jumped so hard that she knocked the cage to the floor. She turned around wide-eyed, her mouth opening and closing, as if she were trying to come up with some excuse on the spot. But this time, there was no excuse. "Look, this isn't what it looks like," he stammered, raising his hands. I crossed my arms. "Oh, of course not. You're in my backyard, in the middle of the night, with a cage in your hand, trying to open Benny's house. That definitely doesn't sound like what it is." She opened her mouth again, but before she could speak, sirens began to sound. Because, as she stood there floundering like a fish out of water, the police were already on their way. The cars arrived quickly, because apparently, when someone breaks into a neighbor's house to kidnap an animal, the police take it seriously. When the police came down, the scene was perfect. On one side, me, arms crossed, with a satisfied smile on my face. On the other, Karen, all disheveled, trying to explain herself, while an empty cage rolled around on the floor. It was beautiful. The policeman, the same as before, looked at her with a mixture of weariness and incredulity. "Ma'am, we've received a report of trespassing and attempted animal theft. Can you explain what's going on?" She tried. I swear she tried. But nothing that came out of her mouth made sense. Minus I was just trying to check that the monkey was safe. In the middle of the night? With a cage? Invading your neighbor's yard? Every time a policeman repeated the facts, her excuse became more ridiculous. And then came the sentence that ended the evening on a high note. "Ma'am, we've been here before and clarified that there was nothing illegal. But this time, you've committed a real crime. You have the right to remain silent." Yes, she was arrested. Right there, in front of me. I swear I tried to keep my composure. I tried to hold in my laughter. I failed miserably. The police took her away, and I stood there, taking a deep breath and enjoying the silence for the first time in weeks. Benny? He didn't even wake up in all the chaos. He slept the whole time, oblivious to the fact that he had almost been kidnapped by a crazy lady. The next day, the whole neighborhood knew what had happened. The neighbors, who previously thought she was just a bit annoying, were now fully aware that she was completely insane. And then came the icing on the cake. A few days later, I received a flyer on my doorstep. It was a notice from the neighborhood association. Karen was officially being evicted from the neighborhood. The reason? Trespassing, abuse of authority, and inappropriate conduct with neighbors. Ah, what a lovely ending. And Benny? Well, a few days later, he was taken to the sanctuary, where he now lives his life without having to deal with crazy neighbors. Me? Since Karen disappeared, I've had no more complaints about my yard, my car, or my lawn. The neighborhood is at peace, and every time I see a monkey on TV, I remember Benny and laugh. Because at the end of the day, he was the real winner in this story. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this.